で、教育コーセラはいい。でも、番組開始として、コメントビューがあれ仕方、あれすると、マルチコメントフィルターを起動して、コピーして、出力すると、ダメだ。ライブ配信のこっちは ?YouTube はプレイヤーを感じたろう。私に意味はないか。この生放送で、こう追加にして、このままにして、で、これビデオの YouTube の方だから、ここで、コピーして、ダメだ、これは。しかない。プロセスエクスプローラーを起動してみよう。コメント欄がずっと起動してないと、ちょっと問題があるので、クローム、大丈夫でしょうとすると、マルチコメントフィルターを、ダメだ。仕方ない。これは時々記念するしかないな。実際のことの始めるしかない。で、レクチャー40の途中でコースが終わったので、終わってここの練習問題までやる予定です。
There's a concept that's very important to understand for really all languages, and certainly JavaScript is no different. And the concept is passing variables by value versus by
コールバイバ
reference.
リューとコー
And
ルバイ
this is
リュー
what we're going to
です。
discuss right now.
まずレベルですか、お使いのと
Now,
ころか
first
な。
of all, what does that mean to pass or copy things by value, variables by value? So the loose definition is that given B equals A, so if you have an A and a B, and you're copying the
そっか。
contents of A
じゃあ、ローコ
into
ピー
the
とディーコピ
variable
ーの話
B.
ね。
So passing, when it's talking about functions, or copying in case of just regular equality, B equals A. So copying or passing things by value means that changing the copied value in B does not affect the value stored in A and vice versa. So if I change B after I've copied the value of A into B, A stays the way it was before and B changes but does not affect A. On the flip side, passing or copying things by reference means that given B equals A, again we're copying the contents of A into B, passing and
全部すると分
copying
かり
by
やすいよね。
reference would mean that changing copied value in B does indeed affect the value stored in A and vice versa. So they're kind of pointing to the same location. Now in JavaScript, the way it works is that primitives are passed by value and objects are passed by reference. Or to say it another way, primitives are copied by value and objects are copied by reference. Now, the truth is that underneath the hood in the JavaScript engine, everything is actually passed and copied by value. And the difference is why one is really called pass by reference and one pass by value really comes because of the way the objects and primitives are stored in memory. So let's go ahead and take a look. So here on the left we have primitives, a is equal 7, and then we're copying variable a, or the contents of variable a, into variable b. And on the right, we have a variable a that is equal an
プリミティ
object
ブはそ
that
っ
has a
か、コピー
property
かな。
x to be equal 7.
イミュータブルだ
And
か
then on
ら。
the second line, we're copying the contents of a into b. So b in the end of the day, in both circumstances, ends up with the same value as a, at least at this point. So the question is, how does that work? Let's take a look at some visualization to understand this. So when it comes to primitives, the first thing that happens is we declare variable a and we equal it to 7. So what happens in memory is that a gets memory allocation. In this case, the memory address is 001, and the value
まずが
that's sitting in that memory is 7. Now, when we declare variable b and then copy the contents of variable a into b, what we're
イミュ
doing
ータブ
is
ル
we're
だからコピー
allocating
が発生
another
するの
memory
か。
location, in this case 002, and we're copying the value 7 into that memory location. So then when we overwrite the variable b with the value 5, what we're actually doing is we're placing a different value into the same memory location that b is pointing to, in this case 002. So in this scenario, what you end up with is that A is still pointing to its original memory location 001, which still has number 7 in it as the value in that memory location, and B is now pointing to 002 with a different value. So therefore, A and B really have nothing to do with each other. They really just a copy, or originally were copied one into the other, but at this point, they are not affecting one the other. And this scenario is what is referred to as passed by value or copied by value. So let's take a look at the same scenario, but in case of objects. The first thing that happens, of course, is again we declare an object. In this case, we declare an object literal with the property x7. So what's going on is that A gets again allocated a memory location. Again, in this case, 001 is the address in memory. And what gets put into that memory location as the value is another memory address. So inside the address 001, the value in that position in memory is another
オブ
memory
ジェクト用のリファ
position
レンスが
that is pointing to another
作ら
part
され
of
るってこと
memory.
ね。
And in the address 003 is where the value actually sits. Now, the truth of the matter is, I'm actually oversimplifying this. What is actually sitting in the memory location 003 is a list of other memory locations where they have the same type of relationship where it's a primitive now and it's
A
pointing
は
to a
リファレン
particular
ス
memory
とし
location
て
at
001を持
which
ち、
memory location the value
この
7 is
値
stored.
が
But to make this a
オブ
little
ジェク
bit
トリファレンス
simpler and not to
003だ。
confuse you further, I'll just say that memory location 003 is where the actual value is contained, or the actual value is stored. So then when we declare variable b and we equate variable b to a, what's actually happening is that, again, the value of variable a, where variable a is pointing to, is copied into
この
variable b.
意味で変
Well,
わ
the
る
value
ペー
is
ジ作られているけ
003.
ど、
It's a memory location.
同じリ
And
ファ
it's
レンス
copied
を持
into
つ。
b. So b now, even though it's sitting at a memory location 004, its value is another memory location with a value of 003. So what ends up
まあもう
happening
そう
is
だ
they're
ね。
both pointing to a memory location 003. So finally, when we update b.x equals 5, what we're actually updating is the memory location where b is pointing to, and that is the memory location 003. The value, the direct value of b still stays the same. It's the value that it's pointing to that is changing. And since both A and B are pointing to the same value, the end result is that both are
当然、こ
pointing
の場合
to a
A
changed
と
value.
X だ
And this
か
is what's
ら、
called pass by reference. So the bottom line is the difference between pass by value and pass by reference is that in pass by value, the values, once it's changed, do not affect their original value or the original variable. As opposed to pass by reference, when you change the value and the object that's passed by reference, the original object that's pointing to it is changed as well. So that's the theory behind how pass by reference and pass by value works. In part 2 of this lecture, we're going to jump into the code editor and we're going to see these concepts in action.
というわけで、その結果を実際のコードで見てみようって話ですね。
In part 1 of our lecture, we spoke about the theory and kind of tried to understand what does it mean to pass something or copy something by reference versus by value. In this lecture, we're going to look at some examples so we can experience these concepts in code. So I'm currently looking at lecture 47 at the script.js file that is located in the lecture 47 folder. I'm going to go ahead and close the file explorer here in Sublime, and let's take a look at our example code. So here we have a variable a equals 7, and then what we're doing is we're copying a into b, and 7 obviously is a number, so it's a primitive, so it should copy into variable b by value, which means b is no longer pointing anywhere to where a is pointing to. So if we console them out, console.log them out, and let's go ahead and do that right now. I'll just comment this out for now. You'll see that both are 7. Now, what happens when we change
じゃあ、ここをちょっとやってみよう。スイッチの HTML です。14。レクチャーのじゃない。コードの、じゃあいいや。いやー、違うな。Git のレクチャー。レクチャーは、AS ベーシスと、で、コードの JS ベーシックス。レクチャー JS ベーシックス。んえーっと、コール、コール、コンソール、コロン、プラス A。あとさ、コンソール点 A。まあ、気になるからね。文字列の場合が見たい。 これはコントロール Alt P だったかな。そうするとデバッグコンソールで、ここが、エラー。じゃあ、47。value and difference。当然こうなってる。アップ、と、b イコール、はいと。で見ると、こうデバッグ。同じチェンジする。こうデバッグ。8080でやってくれない。もう一回。おー。レファレンスがかかってる。こうやると、アップデート A と B はノーマルね。意味が。
B equals 5. Well, since B is pointing to its own memory location, B is not going to affect where A is pointing to, so they're both going to go on their merry way. In other words, after B's update, A is still going to remain to be 7, and B now is going to be 5. Let's go ahead and save that and take a look. So sure enough, A is now 7, and B is 5. So that's pass by value. Let's go ahead and comment that out. And let's take a look at a different example. Let's save that. Take a look at a different example, which is pass by reference. And now we're speaking about objects. Let's uncomment that. So in the first line here, we're having A equal to an object literal that has a property 7. And then we're copying A into B. So as you remember from the first part, what we're actually doing is copying the memory location that it's pointing to this object literal into B, not the actual values. So if we now output A and B, let's go ahead and do that. You'll see they're both objects that have X property equal to 7. So now if we go ahead and update B, in other words, b.x equals 5, what we're actually updating is we're updating this object which both variables are pointing to. So after update b.x update, if we log A and log B again, you'll see that both A and B have changed the X value to be 5. So let's go ahead and save that. And you can see here after update, X is now 5 from
またこっちも同じように。まずこれをコピーして、A イコールインテグラル x コロン7。で、b イコール a。で、ここで b イコール b 点 x。x を5にする。同じリファレンスになるから、 あ、どうで自動なのか。やっぱりコンソールしなきゃ。じゃあ、ここは、ここで、JS を、横に並べて開く。違う。Open with Live Site。じゃあ、質問して。ハテナ、要素の、コンソール。ここで、今読んでくれないから読むように、設定を変えて、変えると、そっか。オブジェクトオブジェクトのままか。そうすると、この辺をどうすればいいかな。みんな、ブロック、コンソール点、かけ、そっか、今のはこういうふうにやったかな。イコール、X コロン、なんだ、そう、ログ、が、この、X コロンで出るじゃないか。E イコール、で、B 点 X イコール5、X コロン5、B、X コロン5。やっぱりどうやってなるんだけど。うーん。なるほどね。そうだ。ダメだ。つまり、アップ、ビートと X アップの場合の、B をそのままよ。両方変わると。 つまり、
logging different term called passing by value. It's really no different. We'll tell our console that we're inside the change primitive. It really only applies when we speak about passing value into function calls. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of those examples, same memory location. So these two examples are examples of copying by value and copying by reference. But we've been using a different term called passing by value and passing by reference. And that term really only applies when this is now 5 from logging A and X is still 5 from logging B. And again, that is simply because they're both pointing to the same memory location. So these two examples are examples of copying by value and copying by reference. But we've been using a different term called passing by value and passing by reference. And that term really only applies when we speak about passing value into function calls. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of those examples. So let's uncomment that. So here we have a function called change primitive, and we're going to pass a primitive value into it. We're going to go ahead and tell our console that we're inside the change primitive, and we'll log the value before we change it. Then we're going to change the value and log the value after we change it. And afterwards, we're going to go ahead and invoke that. So we'll say the value equals 7. We'll pass it inside that change value function. And notice that when we pass a value inside the change primitive function, what is really going on is that the value 7 is being copied and equal to prim value. It's really no different when we're passing it here than saying, and I'll put it in comments, but in memory, what's really going on is that prim value is being equal to value. That's really what's going on. So it's really a different form of copy that we saw before. So actually, let's leave that alone. So it'll be a comment here. So, and afterwards, we're going to go and announce that we're done with the change primitive, and we're going to log our original value. And the original value should stay 7, even though we changed it inside the change primitive function, simply because they're pointing to prim value, and value are still pointing to different memory locations. So let's go ahead and save that. And it will execute. So we're in change primitive before it's 7, because we passed 7, so it got copied into this variable prim value. And after, right here, it's 5, because we changed that. And after change primitive has been called, the original value of the value variable is still 7. And it's because they're pointing to two different locations, just like before. It's really just a copy of the value itself. It's not pointing to the same memory location. So let's go ahead and comment this out so it doesn't crowd our console, and save that, and should clear it. And let's go to the last example here, and let's uncomment it. And we're doing exactly the same thing, except now we're changing object. And since objects are passed by reference, what we should end up with is we should end up with the same object that's pointing to the same location. So the setup is very similar. We have a value that is an object literal with a property x equal to 7. And again, when we're passing it into the change object function, what we're really doing is we're saying object value is equal to value. And this is the same thing that's going on in the previous example, except that now we're calling it passing, right? Because we're actually passing this value into the function change object. Inside the function, we're again announcing that we're inside the change object function, kind of console out the object value that is passed into us, changing the x value of it, logging it afterwards, logging the entire object again just to see what it is after we change the x. And then when we come back from the function, we want to know what the original value is. Has it really changed because we changed it inside the function? And obviously it should change because both the object value and the value variables are both pointing to the same memory location. So let's go ahead and save it. As you can see, before logging it afterwards inside the change primitive, but in memory, what's really going on is that prim value is being equal to value. That's really what's going on. So it's really a different form going to value. And the original value should stay 7, even though we changed it inside the change primitive function, simply because they're pointing to prim value, and value are still pointing to different memory locations. So let's go ahead and save that. and it will execute. So we're in change primitive before it's 7 because we passed 7, so it got copied into this variable prim value. And after, right here, it's 5 because we changed that. And after change primitive has been called, the original value of the value
パラミ
variable
プリミティ
is
タイプ
still
タイプ
7.
の場合
And it's
は値が入っ
because
ている
they're
から、
pointing to two different
こ
locations
のコ
just
ピ
like
ーである
before.
と
It's
ころ
really
の
just
影
a
響は受けない。
copy of the value itself. It's not pointing to the same memory location. So let's go ahead and comment this out so it doesn't crowd our console and save that and should clear it. And let's go to the last example here and let's uncomment it. And we're doing exactly the same thing, except now we're changing object. And since objects are passed by reference, what we should end up with is we should end up with the same object that's pointing to the same location. So the setup is very similar. We have a value that is an object literal with a property x equal to 7. And again, when we're passing it into the change object function, what we're really doing is we're saying obj value is equal to value. And this is the same thing that's going on in the previous example,
この場合も
except
場合
that
は
now we're
オ
calling
ブ
it
ジェクトのプリバ
passing,
レンス
right?
が
Because we're
コ
actually
ピーされる。
passing this value
つまり
into the
は
function change object. And inside the function,
オブジェ
we
バ
can
リューとかで
announce
同
that
じ
we're
バレン
inside the change object function,
オブジェク
kind
ト
of
を参
console
照して
out the object value that is passed into us, changing the x value of it, logging it afterwards, logging the entire object again just to see what it is after we change the x. And then when we come back from the function, we want to know what the original value is. Has it really changed because we changed it inside the function? And obviously it should change because both the obj value and the value variables are both pointing to the same memory location. So let's go ahead and save it. As you can see, before
そうなると
object is
7号分になる。
x7, after
やってみ
object
よう。
is
今のは、Cousera HTML の参考資料。GitHub.com を読み込んで、ユーザーコンテンツと、これに関係ありそうなやつ全部を読み込むと、フルスタックコース4、エグザンブル、レクチャー47なのスクリプトです。ファンクションチェンジオブジェクト。こうコピーして、ここはコメントアウト。コール、ファンクション。つまり、これでデバッグすると、インチェンジャブルジャポーでなるよね。
x5, and after we call change object, the original value now is changed and it's x5 because both of those variables were pointing to the same memory location, so they are affecting the same values. So this is how passing by value and passing by reference works in code. So to summarize, it's very important to understand this concept that is passing by value versus passing by reference. You can't really code without understanding this basic concept. And the simple rule to remember is this: Primitives are passed or copied by value, and objects are passed or copied by reference. And again, copying or passing by value means that the new variable really has no relation to the old variable, and changing the value in it will not affect the old variable. As opposed to passing or copying by reference, changing that new variable, changing the values in that new variable will affect the values of the old variable from which the object was actually copied.
で、そこをテストで確認すると。20分かかるもわかんねえよ。JavaScript doesn't allow anything to be passed by. Primitive variable や by copy ってことだね。で、console log y イコール x イコール5のまま。これいいのかな？そういうことだ。戻って、もう一度ダメです。JavaScript doesn't allow anything to be passed by. 発売領域のすべてを許可していないじゃなくて、オブジェクトの場合はリファレンスをコピーしている。だからこれをこっちで送信で、次の項目と。レクチャー48。
In this lecture, I'd like to show you one more way to create objects in JavaScript. And it's a very common way, especially if you have functionality together with those objects, very similar to like a Java
プロト
class,
タイ
for
プによる
example.
です
Right
か。
now, I am in script.js, and I am located in the lecture 48 folder. So let me go ahead and close the file explorer. Before we jump into yet another way how to create objects in JavaScript, I'd like to explore one particular topic. Let's go ahead and write a function, and we'll call this function, let's say, test. And all we'll do in this function is do console.log, and we'll say hello Coursera. Okay, so if we save that now, well, nothing's going to happen. We actually have to call that function. So let's go ahead and call the function test. And now we see hello Coursera. Now, we discussed in one of the previous lectures as to what happens when you actually invoke a function. We discussed the fact that a new execution context is created within which this line or whatever is inside the function is actually executed. And we also discussed the fact that that execution context gets a special variable called this. Let's find out what this variable is pointing to. Let's do a console.log. Truth is, we could just delete this and just put it right here. And let's log what this is at this point, this special variable. Let's go ahead and save that. And this is pointing to the global window object, right? That's the object that has all of these parameters, all of these properties. And in fact, if I actually set a property on this object, say this dot my name, give it Yakov. So if I save that, and if I output this again, and in fact, I could do it right here, I could say this or window dot my name, and I could log that out, console.log, and it will say Yakov, because what I did here is, since this is pointing to the global object, window.myname or my name property was created on the window object. Okay, so that's all nice and well, but if we actually wanted to kind of encapsulate some data within a particular object and use a function for it, then we would need this to point to something else. And this is where function constructors come in. Let's go ahead and erase that and create yet another function. Let's just say function constructors. Okay, so let's create another function, and let's call this function circle. We're going to create circles. And this time we're going to say circle with capital C. Now, there's really nothing about capital C that does anything special other than it lets me know that it's a function constructor. So it's basically just a convention to let other developers know that this is a function constructor as opposed to a regular function. And a circle should have a radius. And what I'm going to do inside the body of the circle is actually nothing more than just say console.log. And I'll go ahead and log this. And here comes yet another way that we're about to learn as to how to create objects. Let's go ahead and create a variable called myCircle. And what I'm going to do is, instead of just invoking the function circle, I'm going to use the new keyword and then say circle and give it, let's say, 10 as the radius. When I invoke a function together with the new keyword, the JavaScript engine makes this point to the object itself that got created, which is the circle. So if I go ahead and console.log the actual myCircle, and so now I'm going to console.log this, and I'm also going to console.log myCircle. It really should be the same thing. Let's go ahead and do that. And then both are empty objects that are of type circle, or sort of type circle. It's not a real type, but it's an object with a name circle. So this means that technically what I could do here is I could say this dot radius. So I could create a sort of a member variable or a property of this circle object, and I could say a radius. So now the radius that I'm creating the circle with is going to be stored as part of my object. So if I go ahead and log the circle now, you'll see that now I'm a circle that has a radius property of 10. Now what's really going on behind the scenes here is that this line right here is really pretty much equivalent to saying new object, as we've done before. And then that object gets named after the function that created it. So it's really a function constructor in that it creates a new object by executing this function in a special way using this special new keyword. Now the function constructor itself, or the function circle, cannot return anything. So if the function returns, let's say, an empty object, an empty literal, and I'll save that, you'll see that we're not really getting the behavior that we want. My circle is now just an empty object. So we can't return anything from the function constructor. It has to remain without a return value. And the new keyword will arrange for us that when it creates an empty object and then sets it to be a circle, it will go ahead and return that object and store it in whatever variable that we're providing for it. So let's save it again. Now we see our circle with the radius 10. Now, what would be an object without some methods? And methods in JavaScript are just functions that are set on properties of objects. So let's go ahead and create one. Let's go ahead and create a this.getArea, and this.getArea is going to be nothing more than a function. And let's go ahead and put this function on a separate line. And the function is going to have no arguments because we're actually going to get at the radius using the this keyword. So we're going to go ahead and have curly braces. Won't forget to say a semicolon here because this is just an expression that gets set to the getArea variable. And here we can use a JavaScript predefined object that actually has been pretty much created the same way that we're creating our circle. So we'll say math.py times, and there's another math method that's called POW, power of our this.radius. And we wanted to raise it to the power of 2. We'll go ahead and put a semicolon after that. Okay, so now we have a getArea method or getArea function that will calculate the area of the circle. So here we created a circle with a radius 10, and we're outputting the circle. Let's go ahead and output myCircle.getArea. And we need to put parentheses after it because this is a function and we're invoking it. So now that we save it, we could see that the area has been calculated. So 10 to the second power, so 100 times pi sounds about right. Let's go ahead and take a little bit of a closer look to this myCircle object that gets created. Let's go ahead and log it one more time. And you see my circle object has a radius of 10. And if we open it up, we'll see the radius is 10. And it has another property called getArea. And the value of getArea is a function. The problem is, as we keep creating these circle objects over and over in our code, we're going to keep creating this getArea function over and over in our code because every time we say new, this entire thing gets created. While for radius, it's perfectly normal because each circle should have its own radius. We really don't need for a type circle to have its own getArea on every object it creates. It really should be just created once, and all the circles, all the instances of a circle should share it. And the way we could do that is by using a special property called prototype. So let's go ahead and cut this out of here. And we'll say circle.prototype .getArea. That is what is going to be equal to our function. And the function is going to be anonymous since we already have the name getArea right here. And again, we don't need an argument because we're going to use this keyword. And the body, we're going to say math.py times math power of this.radius to the second power. So that is actually what we need to return.
あ、プリントに
Okay,
でき
so
るん
there's
だ。
our get area. So let's go ahead and before we even call get area ourselves, let's
プ
go
ロ
ahead
ト
and
タ
take
イ
a
プで
look
入れる
at
こと
my
で、
circle object one more time. Let's go ahead and save this. And I'll put in my circle object and we'll take a look and you can see that the
Radius.
radius is here. The radius equals 10,
で、プロトタイプ
but
の方
get
の
area
全
doesn't exist
件
here.
に
Well, where is it? Well, it's actually sitting inside of the special variable
イン
underscore
スタンス作
underscore
れてクラ
proto
ス、クラスに
underscore
作れてからに
underscore.
なるん
That's a
だね。
special property. If we open that up, you'll see that get area now is right here. And proto is something is going to be existent on every single instance of this object. So if we, for example, create another one, var my other circle, and we'll say new circle, and we'll give it 20 as the radius, and we'll go ahead and console.log my other circle, you'll see that the radius here is 10, and there's no get area,
同
and the
じミ
radius
スを
here is 20, and
プロト
again,
タイプでも
both of them
や
are
ってる
pointing to
か
the
ら、
same proto variable that have a get area, and this get area is actually the same location in memory as this
ゲ
get
ッテリア
area.
ファンクシ
It's
ョンを持
the
ってる
same
けど、
thing,
これ
so
ポー
it
トだ
doesn't
か
get
ら、
recreated over and over. Now, a couple of words of caution. Number one is circle.prototype.getArea is not something you should cut and put inside this function. You could certainly do that, but that would be a mistake. And the reason that would be a mistake is because this function is going to get executed every single time you create a new circle. Well, every single time you don't need to define a prototype. In other words, what you'll be doing is you'll be overriding the memory space of getArea every single time you create a new circle. So
いちいちゲ
basically
ット
that's
リアを呼
wasted
ぶのはメモリ
processing.
の邪魔だ
It's
か
not really
ら、作
wasted
るのは
memory space since it's going to put in the same memory space this function over and over again, but it's wasted processing. So you really should not be putting that inside of a function constructor. So definitely put this outside. Let's go ahead and indent it this way. So that's caution number one. Caution number two is make sure you don't forget the new keyword, because if you omit the new keyword, let's go ahead and comment this out. Let's go ahead and log this variable. You'll see it's undefined. Well, the reason it's undefined is because this is nothing more than a function. It's just a regular JavaScript function. So a regular JavaScript function that you're passing 10 to and actually does not return anything. Well, when it doesn't return anything, this my circle becomes undefined. And if you actually try to say that get area, right, we're going to get an error because it says cannot read property
当
get area
然、
of
オブジェクト持っ
undefined
てない
because
から、マイ
my
サークスゲットリ
circle
アでき
at this
ない。
point is undefined. So make sure you remember to put the new keyword there. One clue is to always make the function constructor names capitalized. That way you will remember that this is not just a regular function, it's actually a function constructor, and you must use it with the keyword new. Okay, so let's uncomment this back out and save it, and now everything works as we expected. So these are function constructors. You could create an object using them using the keyword new, and you could set a prototype property on that function such that whatever property you just set on it will only be created once and will not be created for every single instance of that object.
というわけで、今のところを確認すると、だね。こう、エリアス。これプロトタイプで関数追加する。でもそれを、
In a previous lecture, we saw how the this keyword behaves itself when it's part of a function constructor. That is, it's referring to the function itself or the object itself when that function is invoked together with the new keyword. In this lecture, I would like to look at object literal and how the this keyword behaves itself inside of one. So I'm looking at script.js and I'm located in the lecture 49 folder. So let me go ahead and close the browser and let's create an object literal. Let's call it literal circle since we've done circles before. And an object literal is just two curly braces, and don't forget the semicolon at the end. And we'll give it a radius of 10. Okay, so an object literal with a radius of 10, and we'll put a comma and we'll give it a get area, and get area is going to be a function. Its value of this property is going to be a function. We don't need the name, we already have get area. And we're not going to give it the argument either. What we're going to do is we're going to do console.log, and we'll console.log this right inside the get area method. So let's go ahead and save that. And once we created that object literal, let's go ahead and call the get area function and see what happens when we do console.log this. We obviously have not really yet, at least, calculated the area. So let's go ahead and save that. And we'll see that what's going on here is this is no longer referring to the window object, to the global object, but it's actually referring to our circle class, or to our literal circle, which is an object with a radius of 10. If we open it up, we'll see that it has a get area property and a radius of 10. So when an object literal gets created, this, instead of pointing to the global object, is actually pointing to the actual object that got created. Therefore, what we could do is we can do return math.py times math.power, and we could say this dot radius to the second power. So this is referring to the literal circle object, and it has a property called radius, which is right here. So therefore, this is perfectly legal, and it should work just fine. So let's go ahead and actually console.log the answer to our get area execution. And when we execute that, we do get 314 and so on. So this actually worked just fine. Now, why is that? Why is it that this is working? Why is this keyword referring to the object instead of referring to, like any other regular function, to the global object like a window? Well, believe it or not, you already know the reason to this. And the reason you know this is because when we discussed object literals, I told you that this statement right here, when you open the curly braces, is really tantamount to what? New object. So when that happens, this is actually what's executed in the background, new object. Well, you see that new keyword again. And when we see the new keyword, this variable inside of that object is now referring to the actual object and not to the outside window or outside global object. So this, in fact, works exactly like function constructors in terms of the new keyword, right? Even though the new keyword here is kind of implicit, well, everything's here implicit since this is an object literal. Now, there is a bug, or at least what most people consider is a bug within the JavaScript implementation. In every single browser, it's really within the JavaScript specification. And the bug comes out in this fashion. If inside get area, I will go ahead and create another function, just like I can, and I'll say var increase radius. And it's going to be a function, and I don't need a name again, and I don't really need an argument here either. And inside the body of the function, I am going to go ahead and increase the radius to 20. So I'll say this dot radius equals 20. So now when this method executes right here, or this line executes right here, this dot radius should now be 20. So it shouldn't be 314. It should be a much larger area of the circle. So let's go ahead and actually invoke, we just defined this function here. Don't forget the semicolons, because that's an expression. Let's go ahead and invoke this function right here. So now after this invocation, this dot radius should be 20, and this whole line should execute with the value of this dot radius equals 20. So let's go ahead and save that. And what do you know? It's still 314. That's kind of strange. Well, let's go ahead and console.log what our radius is. This dot radius. What exactly is our radius before we execute this, but after we increased the radius. Let's go ahead and save that, and it's still 10. Now, where did this 20 go? Well, the way this works is that when you have an inner function within another function, this keyword starts pointing to the global object. And we can actually test this by saying window.radius, and this should say 20, and so it does. So this 20 actually got set on the global object instead of on our literal circle object. So how do you get around this? Well, there's a common pattern that people use to get around this. And the way you get around this is you just say var self equals this. So now that you have self, self is always going to be referring to this, and this at this point at least is referring to the literal circle object. So instead of in the inner functions referring to this, you always refer to self. So now radius is equal 20, and now this
セルフレディ
should
アス。
update the radius inside the object literal, inside our literal circle. So when we execute this line right here, this dot radius should be equal to 20, not 10. Let's go ahead and execute this. And as you can see, now our radius is
セル
indeed
フがなっ
20,
て変
and
わる
the
から、
area is much larger. So this is the way you get around this kind of an annoying JavaScript bug, and I guess there is a disagreement out there whether or not that this is a bug or this is intended and this is how
バグ
it's
でき
supposed to
た。
work. Either way, it's not really very useful. And in fact, in the new JavaScript version, which is ECMAScript 6, this supposedly has been fixed.
まあ今 ES6 だからとか変わってるってこと？ああ、違う違う違う違う。スラッシュはいらない。そして、New Tutorials. Here is this course will be applied with a new course which will contain this. It's limited as space. これはリディコで変わるよと。まあこれは Here is のだから。練習問題。練習問題は、待てと、全部閉じて、1で make dir access is basics とサイズ1番だな。そして、コードの X。make dir サイズ倍に JS を作って、こう、ビジュアルソースコードを起動して、構成が、はい。HTML。さあ、ベーシックスと。これを、モジュール4のインデックスと。よし。あ、ダメか。JS。コントロール N の。サイズ1。JavaScript。これは JS の スクリプト。スクリプト JS に B して、その時のなんかこれでやって、コントロール Alt E で実行すれば、まあ、見てるだけでもできそうなはずです。これで OK。レクチャー50は、とりあえず、今回はスキップしましょう。というわけで、レクチャー50まで、39まで、クリアと。でしたので、Git のの授業にのか。あと、コーセラの CSS。スク練習やと。でと。で、終わったから次は、Git ブランチ。スイッチメインとして、Git ブランチ。ENG と。English。次は、ここが残ってるから、月曜日の前につけて、全部じゃないっす。できませんよね。ここだけでやんないと。
Welcome back to the Business English Communication Skills course. Today, we're going to begin Module 4, which focuses on arranging one-on-one meetings and telephoning. In this lesson, you'll learn to use appropriate language and level of formality in telephoning. You'll learn to begin a professional telephone call by giving your name and stating the purpose of the call, refer to a previous meeting or to someone you both know, and to end a call appropriately. So let's begin. As you listen to the phone conversation, think about these questions. First, did the speakers meet before? What's the purpose of the call?
Hello, this is Philson Parr.
Yes, hi, Philson. This is Nancy Friesen.
I met you last week at a conference in Seattle.
Oh, yes, I remember.
Well, I'm calling today because I'm going to be in New York next week, and I was wondering if I could drop by your office.
メット、ビフォーディーや。前にあった場合、ある場合。Yes, they met at a conference in Seattle the previous week. で、本日。ミーティング。っていうだと思うけど、どうかな。Nancy couldn't because she is going to be in New York in next week and wants to stop by Wilson's office. stop 立ち寄りたいって意味だな。ナンシーの右側ののが、calling because she is going to be in New York in the next week. 来週、ニューヨークまで立ち寄りたいということ。
Claremont Marketing, may I help you?
Yes, I'd like to speak to Lucy Peterson.
May I tell her who's calling?
Nancy Friesen.
Would you mind spelling that for me?
Sure. Friesen.
Thank you. Just a moment, Miss Friesen.
Lucy Peterson.
Yes, hello. My name is Nancy Friesen, and Philson Parr suggested that I contact you.
Oh, yes, Philson and I go way back. What can I do for you?
Well, I'm with the Coffee Bug Company, and we've developed a mini coffee maker for travelers. We've had great success selling it in travel stores on the West Coast,
営業電話
and
だ。
we're looking for wider distribution. I understand that you specialize in products for travelers, so I wondered if I could make an appointment to show it to you.
メイ
Well,
クアップイ
yes,
ベン
I'm
トか。
always interested in new products. We're not located in the city, though. Where are you staying?
Midtown by Grand Central.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm taking the train in tomorrow. So why don't we meet for coffee? There's a coffee shop near there called Cafe Grumpy.
Cafe Crumpet?
Cafe Grumpy, Grumpy.
Oh, I've seen it. I think I walked by there this morning.
Great. So let me give you my cell phone number.
ゲット、she wants to get meeting. ここで言っちゃっていいのかね。いい気がするけどな。Nancy's company Coffee Bug has developed a new mini coffee maker and is looking at opportunities for wider distribution.
When you call someone in business, the first 10 seconds of your phone call are very important, and there are 3 things you need to do.
最初の10秒が大
First,
事
of
ね。
course, give your name slowly and clearly. Pause before each name. For example, Nancy Friesen. On the phone, we often say, "This is Daphne Mackey." If you haven't met before, you can introduce yourself with, "Hi, my name is Daphne Mackey." We do not say, "I am Daphne Mackey" on the phone. Next, explain your connection to the person you're calling. If you met each other before, say when. Maybe somebody suggested that you call. Say that person's name very clearly, too.
Did you meet each other before?
I met you last week at the NCA convention in Seattle. We met at the convention last week in Seattle.
Did someone suggest you call?
Philson suggested that I call you. Philson suggested that I give you a call.
ウィルソンを提案する。
Philson
Wilson と会い
suggested
た
I
い。
contact you.
And last,
I
of
give
course,
you
if you haven't
I
met
contact
before,
you.
explain who you are, your position and company name. If your company isn't familiar to the person you're calling, give some information about it too.
What's your company and position?
I'm the marketing manager at... I work for a clothing retailer in Taipei. My company makes athletic clothing.
So, just a note about grammar here. Use the simple present to say your name and position, but use the past to talk about how you met or who
順
referred
番
you.
がそ
The
ういうの
verb
つけ
after
ていけないってことかな。
suggested is the simple form of the verb. Here are some examples. My name is. This is. I work for. I'm with. And here are some examples in the past tense. We met at. Bob gave me your name. Maria suggested I call you. Complete the sentences, then listen to the correct answers.
Product Appetite
Number 1. My name is Gina.
ここまで戻った方がいい。3 seconds to say the missing words to yesterday. My name is. Hello, my
Number
name.
1.
This is
My
Anna.
name is Gina Williams.
Hello, this is Gina Warrior.
Number 2. Hello, this is Gina Williams.
Make grant that I hope you かな。
Number 3. Mark Grant suggested that I call you.
Suggested that I call.
Number 4. Mark Grant gave me your number.
Gave me. I work for.
Number 5. I'm a sales representative for MRX.
てか、I work for ね。
Number 6. I work for MRX. Now, let's try it. Use the information on the screen to practice beginning conversations. Then listen to one possible way to say it.
3 seconds to say the missing words. My name is Alex Mills.
This
This
is
is
Alex
Anna.
Mills. We met at the electronics show
どうい
in
うメ
Las
タなんだな。
Vegas.
My name.
My name's Chris Taylor. I'm the marketing manager at Seascape Designs in Los Angeles, and Matt Bond suggested that I give you a call.
My name is Pat Lee.
My name
This
is
is
Pat Lee.
Media
Maria Carr
Carr
gave me
gave
your
me
name.
a name.
I'm a senior manager at Marvel Productions.
Marvel.
Just as you studied in Module 3 when you were working on writing email messages, it's important not to be too abrupt. We don't just jump right in and say, I want to meet you, or I want your help. Here are some ways to explain why you're calling someone. I'm calling to ask. I'm calling to find out if we could meet. I'm calling because I'd like to ask you for some help. I was wondering if you would be willing to meet with me. I'm hoping that we could meet. I was hoping that you could meet.
I was.
What follows each of these expressions? Write the number on the blank. The final part of our lesson is about ending a call. Listen to the way conversations 1 and 2 ended.
Well, so I'll see you in your office next Monday at 2. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'll see you then.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, so I'll see you tomorrow at 10 at the Cafe Grumpy.
Great. Thanks so much for agreeing to meet with me.
You're welcome. See you then.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
To be
See you
polite,
then. Bye
we don't
bye.
end a call abruptly.
あと何するかはまず
We
確認
often
するべきだよ
signal
ね。
the end with expressions like these. And, as you learned in Module 1, we usually introduce these ending sentences with a word like, well, okay, or so. Listen to the intonation we use with these short transition words. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Okay, well, I really appreciate your time and help. No problem. So, it was nice to talk with you. Sure, you too. There are several ways to thank someone you spoke to. Thank you is more formal than thanks, and of course is more formal than sure. Listen to this. Well, thank you for talking with me. Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so thanks for your help. Of course.
Thanks for your help.
If you made plans to meet, confirm the time and or the place before you say goodbye. Okay, I'll see you on Friday. Okay, so I'll see you on Friday at 10:30.
まあ、
Right.
そういう
See you
条件
then.
があったら、
Goodbye. Bye.
なるって。まあ、電話の仕方ですね。次が大変なのよ。できるかな。Read the beginning and end of phone call someone you meet on you begin explain your conversation includes your name, your credentials, your purpose for calling. Then wait for brief seconds and close conversation. Don't forget to these things. Thank person. To record audio in Windows. 英語やで、これは今すぐできんな。っていうか、プレベルでやった方がいいので、これはここまでですね。じゃあ、これは、コーセラはここまでにして、今回の課題はここまでですね。今のところは、後でやることにしましょう。では、ここまでです。では、さようなら。